Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on LinkedIn Live. Today's event is the first in our cloud series and will focus on the topic of becoming cloud aware. My name is Patty Collins, Director of Business Development and Marketing Operations for Healthlink Advisors, and I will facilitate today's discussion. Attendees will be muted, but questions may be submitted through the chat feature on your screen. Healthlink Advisors is a boutique advisory firm with deep Big Four experience, a growth mindset, and a focus on culture. Our diverse team of industry leaders maximizes client value by applying bold strategies to drive positive change. Our company focuses in the areas of clinical, business, and IT for our healthcare provider and payer organizations. In the provider market, this includes a rapidly expanding base of health system clients across the US and globally, including academic medical centers to integrated delivery networks and community based hospitals. We are proud to be top ranked by class in the Strategic HIT Advisory Services segment. Please visit our website, healthlinkadvisors.com, for more information. Today's discussion topics include the importance of creating a cloud strategy, why organizations consider cloud, including business drivers and benefits, and components of a cloud aware strategy. I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. Chris Jenkins is an accomplished professional with 30 years experience in the healthcare industry, serving in both CIO and CTO roles. Chris is a results-driven executive with demonstrated experience in strategic planning, IS operations, technology management, and IS service delivery. He serves as Senior Vice President of Advisory Services for Healthlink Advisors, leading the delivery team, overseeing project success, and ensuring optimal delivery and outcomes for our clients. Mark Pasquale joined Healthlink Advisors over 3 years ago and serves as Vice President in our Advisory Services Group. Mark is an accomplished executive leader with over 30 years of IT experience, primarily focused on the strategic analysis, operational management, development, delivery, and support of IT solutions for the healthcare industry. With that, I will pass it over to Chris and Mark to begin our discussion on the topic of the importance of establishing a cloud strategy.
Hey, thank you, Patty. And thanks to all the attendees for participating in today's discussion. We're looking forward to talking through a very relevant topic in the healthcare industry, and which is defining a cloud strategy. As you know, this can be a very broad topic. We could discuss the true definition of cloud, physiological, philosophical concept behind that. We could talk about the best way to architect a cloud environment. We could debate on the best cloud service or managed service provider. All those are very interesting topics, but today I want to just level set. Our discussion is really going to focus on defining a cloud strategy so that we can determine how that will best align with business drivers for an organization and positions them for success. We won't get into bits and bytes today or the architectural design of a cloud environment, but we will at a later date on one of the other live wire events that we have. We would like for this to be, I'll say, interactive. And by that, I mean, please pose questions through the chat. Mark and I will talk quite a bit, but we like to answer the questions and have it as interactive as possible. So with that said, let's move into the first topic. Why is defining a strategy around cloud services important to an organization? And at a high level, cloud has matured and become much more relevant in healthcare. The strategy is very complex. In many organizations, there's a need to just move forward and get into the cloud environment. Sometimes it's driven by the CEO, the CIO, but it's not as easy as that. It's very complex. And if you don't think through why you're doing that, how it impacts the organization, it sets you up for failure. Also, identifying the great business cases and the benefit and impact is important. In many cases, we see that vendors are driving organizations to the cloud, such as Microsoft and Office 365. They position their solution where you pretty much have to go in that route, or they make it almost unaffordable if you choose not to. And the last piece is really planning will help you define the why, the what, the when, the how, and the impact of leveraging cloud services. And Mark, let's talk about a couple of details around some of these items.
Yes, you brought up a very good point about the vendors driving organizations into the cloud. A lot of health systems today are finding their cloud strategy almost by default because the vendors are driving that way. For example, if you look at the majority of PACS systems that are contracted today, they are cloud-based contracts. The ERP vendors are no longer on-prem; they're all cloud-based contracts. And now the EMR vendors who are also doing that, where you can, there are remote hosts for Epic and Cerner have been remote hosting for a long time now, but the actual cloud services, true cloud providers are now starting to transition those systems into that environment. So health systems are really at this spot where they are falling into a strategy. They're using a multi-cloud approach because that's what the vendors are doing. If you want to use Oracle for ERP, you'll use the Oracle Cloud. So if you use certain PAC systems, you would be on Azure as opposed to AWS. So it's time to really organize this cloud
Mhm.
strategy uh, for to really provide that consistency and consolidation, manage cost effectively, governance properly, and come up with a path to go forward that makes sense for your health system.
Yeah, it's good points, Mark. And once again, if you just tiptoe into the cloud or go full speed into the cloud without an overall strategy, sometimes you will be technology focused and not outcomes focused, and that can create some challenges long term for the organization and even stall your cloud migration and not you will not achieve the overall benefits that many organizations do by moving to a true cloud native environment. So, so let's talk a little bit now about some of the benefits of moving into the cloud. And um, here's a few that we can cover. Mark, you want to touch on a couple of these?
Sure. I think it's really important to understand that to realize the benefits of the cloud, you don't really want to just take your existing stack and migrate it. There are a lot of different advantages to going to the cloud, and you need to take advantage of those. Like for example, uh, doing some application upgrades and modernization, where you take advantage of the different capabilities. I mean, the to take advantage of the API endpoints that the cloud offers. For example, several years ago, there was uh, the opportunity to start leveraging machine learning and AI capabilities of the cloud, where that you could modernize your existing application suite. So, yeah, I think it's really just important to look at it from making sure that to take advantage of it, you optimize your applications. You really look at your infrastructure, and then look at really optimizing your workflows and your business processes to really reduce that load. So if you can focus on those items, you can take advantage of some of those uh, cloud capabilities. So, of course, the cloud gives you the ability to run at a rapid pace. It allows you to scale and flex your capacity, which I think for health systems is really important. Of course, it supports growth and innovation, but really the ability to spin up and to move forward on initiatives within your health system is a critical component to leveraging the cloud computing strategy. We talked about some efficiencies through modernization and workflow optimization. It's the same thing
Mhm.
really with creating efficiencies in all processes across ITE, and the also making sure that a lot of organizations are leveraging cloud now to actually improve security and data protection. There's data governance aspects that are going to the cloud. Organizations are leveraging cloud now to because security resources are very scarce and hard to come by. So a lot of organizations are leveraging the cloud to improve security, which is a dynamic that has been more recently put into the benefit aspects.
Yeah, it's good points, Mark. And I think the security component's pretty important in terms of in terms of the benefits, you still have to have security internally, right? So I think you still have to think about how you're going to connect to the cloud and how you're going to manage that environment, troubleshoot it. But many of these service providers or cloud providers have a tremendous amount of security tools to help secure their environment where the data lives. I think the other important piece is, from an end user standpoint, and many of us are consumers of data, of technology. You don't really care where everything lives. You just want to get access to it and be able to have it at the fingertips when you need it. And the benefits of scaling, the benefits of aligning with the business needs to allow the organization to grow at the pace they need to grow in a secure manner is very important to many organizations, and tremendous benefits of doing that. You kind of mentioned the modernization, but many organizations have a tremendous amount of complexity. We talked about enterprise imaging. We've seen a lot of consolidation with imaging. And as that consolidation is taking place, generally some organizations have 20 to 25 different imaging solutions. And by consolidating those as they're going through that process of understanding what they have, what they need, how it's built. Many of those service providers or many of those imaging providers are actually, pretty much asking you to go to the cloud, and they've architected the environments around cloud native um, technologies to make access to imaging faster, to allow you to consolidate many of those applications that you have in-house that drives very complex non-standard workflows and really helps an organization to streamline their environment. So, it's not a copy and paste. I think that's one of the benefit of moving to the cloud. You don't take what you currently have today, which may meet your needs, but it may not be optimal, and just copy that over into a cloud environment. So that's the benefit of truly taking advantage of cloud native tools, environments, solutions that are managed in whether that's a SaaS model or even a PaaS model. That's some of the real benefits of doing that. But kind of going back to the importance of strategy and tying it in, if you don't think through all those pieces, and if you just say, I'm going to extend my infrastructure out to the cloud and make it a technology focused initiative, but not really think through the strategy, the operations, the support, the functional requirements, you're really missing the big picture and not taking advantage of the a full value of a migration into those environments.
That's a very good point. I think when you start looking at why certain migrations don't go extremely well, I think it's really important to understand that the cloud migration is really a team sport. It requires a strategy across the organization. It is not an IT project. It is IT supported, but it's organizationally driven. It's really the same with any large initiative for your health system. The cloud has to be the same. So the individuals across your organization responsible for strategy, for operations, for governance should be engaged, partnering with the IT team in order for a cloud
Mhm.
migration to really be successful.
Yeah, agree. Mark, we have a question, and it's basically how would you go about selecting the right cloud service provider? From Walter. Walter, we're going to get to that here in a little bit, but it's a little bit of a loaded question. There's not one simple answer, but we will talk through that as we get into the components of a strategy or considerations that as you start developing your overall strategy. Kind of when you get to the end and to the point where you've identified your business drivers and opportunities, then you get to the point of saying, all right, where does this fit, and how does this fit in my organization? And the answer may be multiple cloud service providers, but we'll talk to that in a little more detail. But thank you for the question. Yeah. So, Mark, anything else on the benefits at this point?
I think that covers things pretty well.
Yeah.
I think it's going into the actual strategy at the core, where it really comprises a solid strategy. As I mentioned, would be organizationally wide and focus on desired outcomes to take real advantage of the cloud capabilities.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start talking a little bit about strategy. Um, let's start talking a little bit about strategy now, and then some of the questions that will inform a cloud strategy include, what are my overall goals? What do I want to really accomplish? How ready am I for the cloud? That's pretty important, right? So while you may want to move to the cloud, are you really ready, and can you support the cloud? Or maybe the fact that you can't support what you have might be a good reason to move into the cloud. Um, but as you mentioned, it requires an enterprise focus. Uh, it is not a technology project, or technology engagement. There's a lot of technology that enables it and that supports it, but overall, it has to be an initiative that is outcomes focused and organizationally supported and understood. And that drives the transformation to the cloud and the value to an organization. So let's delve into the details, Mark. I think we have a couple approaches that we generally use when we start defining the strategy.
We do. We really want to make sure that we understand the organization. We do a readiness assessment, uh, working with our health system clients to understand where they're at from a readiness perspective, not just the skill set for the cloud, but organizationally, are they ready to actually change and transition? We look at the current tools and technologies. We actually do a technology assessment as well to understand from a modernization perspective what the best cloud benefits could be. We look to how to improve and drive operational improvements. So there's a lot of assessment that goes on. But what we really look at first is we have our phase zero approach. It's really part of that discovery, preparation, and readiness assessment that we do. So that involves education around the organization for the key stakeholders. We inform them on cloud services. We discuss different options. This is really, to Walter's point, even really before a cloud provider is selected or even evaluated. We talk about what the cloud benefits could be for the organization based on their existing business drivers. So we identify those business drivers and needs. We align that with the cloud capabilities. And then we look at things like guiding principles because we want to set up some guardrails. Right now, health systems tend to struggle because the cloud is very easy it's very easy to deploy. It's sometimes difficult to manage. So the health system IT groups they undergo pressure because they have different departments that have worked with certain vendors that are offering cloud capabilities that can be spun up very quickly, and they'll move forward and it gets added to the project list. So a guiding principle in a cloud migration would be to actually limit that so that you can focus on the actual migration of your existing footprint into a more robust and higher performing type platform in the cloud. So those are just some of the guiding principles that we would look at. We we also will look to see if the IT organization is really ready for a cloud. We'll go through if you can bring up the readiness framework on the
Yeah, sure,
screen.
sure, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, we go through to see if the organization is really ready. We'll look at the IT environment. We'll do an infrastructure and architecture analysis. We look at staffing support, the different functions that are done. And then we also will do a little bit of review because this is a change in funding. So this is really going from a traditional CapEx model to an OpEx model within the either funded from an enterprise perspective or sometimes funded via IT. So as you know, health systems run very thin margins. Additional expense in OpEx needs to be managed very effectively, or your cloud migration can get to a point where it's placing a significant burden on your ability to make your annual operating budget. So that transition from going from a capital spend for infrastructure and then implementation is really totally different in the cloud, and that needs to be. It's a fairly basic thing that's easily understood, but it just has to be reinforced throughout the health system. Otherwise, you may have some difficulty with expansion of cloud services causing a problem with your annual operating budget. And then also part of phase zero, we look at risk, we look at compliance, we look at security. We'll look to see what type of risk management
Mhm.
capabilities are in place today. What are some of the compliance aspects, and what are some of your security capabilities, and how would that still be managed in a cloud environment? Of course, there's going to be gaps. We'll identify that. We actually will start the roadmap. Our roadmap typically starts with identifying those gaps and how those gaps would be filled, and the opportunities to leverage the cloud capabilities to fill those gaps.
Yeah, good points, Mark. And I think the educating of the stakeholders is very important to let them know that it's bigger than a bread box, right? And here's what cloud really means and what it means to the organization that helps them truly identify some of the business drivers, and then aligning that with cloud capabilities. It's important to note that some of the business needs or the gaps will not be solved by moving into the cloud. So I think making sure you differentiate that so everyone knows it's not just one silver bullet that can solve all their problems. However, these are the key areas and priorities that make the most sense to leverage the cloud environment. The other piece of this is we delve into this will lead to kind of an IS operating model and a business operating model. The financial impact. We both have experience with the financial impact of leveraging outsourced solutions, SaaS solutions. It really depends on how you govern that within your organization, because before you know it, a large spend shows up on your books, either in your department or another department, and it's hard to explain. So you need to make sure you truly understand the financial impact. Finance understands it, IT understands it, the business understands it, and you govern that and you meter that in a very effective way. So those are all items, but so this is the very beginning. The discovery, the prep, and the readiness. Very important steps to identify what you need, what you're getting, and then help prioritize some of the next steps, and that starts building that overall roadmap. Let me go back one here. So I threw this slide up. This is what we call tenets of a cloud forward strategy. We're not going to go into detail on each one of these, but just what we just showed there. We've talked about the value of the cloud, understanding cloud services, cloud migration vendors, how the cloud works, identifying business drivers and needs, part of the readiness component. And this whole organizational and IT readiness is a very, very key component. So underneath each one of these tenets is multiple tasks, multiple strategies, and approaches that you have to go through to get to a good overall strategy. And then the opportunities is where we're starting to build with that roadmap is what opportunities exist within an environment, what makes the most sense, how do you get there, and that aligned with the cloud service models. Um, Let me go back to the question that Walter posed. So, as you see in this model, out to what is it, 9 o'clock? At 9 o'clock, cloud service provider and vendor. So as you go through and create your strategy, identify your opportunities, you start thinking about what do I want to move into the cloud, or how am I going to best leverage the cloud? And cloud and remote hosting are kind of two different things. It's moving compute resources or solutions outside of your organization. So this could apply to remote hosting and EHRs or other solutions that are just hosted outside of your data center. But you get to a point where you identify the opportunities, and then you have to go assess who are the major players, cloud service providers, and AWS, Azure, Oracle Cloud, as Mark mentioned, and there's others out there, but those are the three majors. But you have to determine what is the best fit for you, and do you already have relationships with them? Mark also mentioned, some of the ERP vendors now, or EHR vendors, they have a preference. So if you buy an enterprise imaging solution, they may say, this is how we stand it up, and it's on Azure, or no, we can do either or. So you have to go through a very detailed selection process and understand what is the best fit for your environment, and what is the cost associated with that. The other piece I'll talk about here is, the service provider and vendor. So partnering with the right resource or vendors to help you through that, architecting the environments and migrating over to the cloud. You got the strategy that starts, right? So let's develop the overall strategy, figure out what we're going to do, create an IS operating model. But then the next piece of that is who am I going to partner with that really knows how to architect these environments? And if I don't have the capabilities to support it, who can help me support that long term, or at least be at the elbow with me to support it? So those are two key components once you define that strategy. And Walter, thanks for that question, but it's a selection process you have to go through and an analysis you go through to get to that answer. Mark,
Yeah, we have.
anything I missed?
Yeah, I think that very good points. For me, the way I look at it too is identifying the business drivers and needs, which is one of our cloud forward strategy tenets, is really the key aspect to identify the right cloud service provider. It really is. It's dependent on that, um, and then all the points that you made as well, Chris. We have a couple more questions.
Mhm.
One of them is from, I'm not sure who it's from, but it's what are some of the challenges organizations experience when migrating to cloud services or supporting cloud? I think for what we've seen is that cloud has got to be considered an enterprise asset. Your data center is an enterprise asset. Your cloud environment should be an enterprise asset and managed accordingly. And that means that it needs to have the effective governance that we talked about. It needs to be funded appropriately. It needs to be resourced effectively. Just because you're outsourcing does not mean that it to cloud services does not mean um, a direct reduction in services that need to be provided necessarily. So that has to be analyzed. So I think that the biggest challenge that organizations experience is if they do not treat it as an enterprise asset and govern it appropriately. We have
Yeah, I think the
any other thing on that, Chris?
yeah, the only thing I would add, Mark, is and we mentioned that earlier, is the other challenge they face if they transition like for like and don't truly take advantage or understand, can they shift to true cloud native technology to take advantage of something like that versus their current technology stack or application stack?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good point. We have another question. How long does it typically take for an organization to complete a cloud migration? And it's again, I think uh, it's a fairly wide spread in margin in different amounts of time. It's really all based again on those business drivers and needs. That's one reason why we go through the organizational readiness assessment, and we support those areas that need to be supported in order to help with that migration. So it can be fairly quick depending on scope, but it's typically not a quick project because the scope for most health systems is pretty large.
Yeah, I agree, Mark, and I think getting that strategy, a sound strategy in place, and we're going to head into phase one of that approach as well. But really having your plan. What is it? What are you truly going to move into the cloud? How are you going to best leverage the cloud? And it could be I just need backup and recovery, right? It could be as simple as that, which isn't simple, by the way. But it could be a very long journey. It could be a fairly short journey if organizations just want to do move very specific compute resources to the cloud versus an overall. Enterprise imaging is one of their big replacement projects. So it's all encompassing. I think the other piece I'll go back to. What are the challenges with organizations? Another challenge is this isn't a one and done. That governance, when you make a decision to leverage cloud as part of an enterprise asset compared to everything you have on premise, as you go through your procurement process for new technology, as you go through your selection process for new applications, as you look to rationalize things, it needs to become part of your ongoing process within the organization. And I'll go back for those that have been around a little while. When virtualization first came out, it was a struggle to get application vendors to agree to virtualize their applications, but you had to put a process in place and you had to force vendors to say, I'm virtualizing that first versus having a physical server. Similar process. When you go through your selection process, why does it have to live in, does it best fit? Is it a cloud native solution that should be in the cloud? Is it a SaaS model that makes sense for us financially and from a support standpoint? You have to put those processes in place as part of your decision process as well. And that's a challenge if you don't look at it as an organizational asset that you'll miss out on that.
Good points, Chris. We have another question. A person's asking who typically participates in cloud governance. So we typically see uh, members from organizational strategy that are responsible for strategy. We see operational leadership, and we see IT leadership typically participate in cloud governance.
Yeah, Mark, and why don't we, we kind of hit on phase zero, and we've touched a little bit on some of the other phases through conversation, but why don't we talk a bit about phase one, which really is around governance and the operating model, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so phase one, there's a couple of key components to phase one. We have worked with quite a few health systems in the development and implementation of an analytics center of excellence. And the same type of principle applies to the cloud. So, setting up that cloud center of excellence, that group that's responsible for that design and implementation and support of that cloud environment is really key to overall success. So, in phase one, we look for defining that cloud center of excellence. We also look at doing a real focus on change management requirements. That will be huge. Just like it was with your EHR implementation, it is with a migration to the cloud. Uh, Really making sure that change management is done effectively, because there are going to be a lot of things that change. And making sure that those requirements are identified in phase one is really key to successful migration. And of course, we touched on it earlier, but there's definitely going to be a gap assessment for components that need to be upgraded or added, and identifying those and getting those part of the phase one documentation is really important.
Yeah, very good point. So, kind of building the foundation, the phase zero, what am I going to go do? Phase one is, all right, let's start structuring some governance around that, identifying the gap and putting a few pieces in place. And then that will lead us to really the phase two component, which is the implementation. Um, and this is now where you're actually creating an overall roadmap and planning for the migration into a cloud environment. And Walter, going back to your question and even the migration question, this is where you start thinking about now, who am I going to partner with? What am I going to move into that environment? And more importantly, two components. Now that you've done the readiness assessment, you understand the impact it could have on the financial model, the business model, and the IS operating model. Now you need to put those pieces in place. So, if you don't have the right skill sets, the right resources in house, the right understanding of the environments, you have to train people. You have to make sure your IS operating model supports extending out into a cloud environment. You have to make sure finance is very aware that this is how you need to do business moving forward. The governance gets put in place. And then you get to the point to start designing the environment. And at that point in time, getting back to these tenants, you start also doing a cloud service provider assessment. You start looking at partners in the space that do this and do it really well, and even provide managed services in the cloud for core infrastructure. You could look at, if you're looking to move an EHR to the cloud, whatever those cycles are that you want to leverage, whether it's a SaaS model or an infrastructure component moving in the cloud, you start building those environments and the overall plan to get there. So, Mark, I'm not sure if I missed anything on that.
I think that
Mhm.
covers the key points for that phase. Uh,
Yeah.
it's As we go forward with the series, we'll start breaking that down even further. We'll go through some
Mhm.
more detail of these 8 tenets. We'll start putting together the actual structure for the overall strategy, and going through how Healthlink advisors are approached to doing that, and to helping to ensure the success of the project, to really standardize and standardize a strategy for your organization. We've got a couple more questions. Well, we've got one more here. Many Epic clients are moving to the cloud. What does that mean? So, uh, right now, so if you look at new Epic clients, about 75% of them are being hosted outside of the health system that is contracting. So Epic does a lot of hosting, and that's truly a remote hosted scenario. But Epic is moving into public cloud space. So there are several organizations that are working with Amazon and Azure, Microsoft Azure, to bring their instances. They have non-prod live for several health systems now, and there'll be some production instances, if not right now in production, will be here shortly. Looking at the calendar, so that is happening. It's new for the public cloud to host Epic, but uh, what it should mean is that the the overall cost for infrastructure, uh, especially using that cloud environment, and leveraging the new capabilities of Epic, especially as hyperdrive continues to mature, should make more of the infrastructure. It'll definitely make it more scalable, and it should commoditize it to a point where it actually can save you money from an infrastructure perspective. That won't happen initially. The existing infrastructure will still be required for a while on Epic, but as Epic Web Services matures, as their hyperdrive client matures, as migration to a public cloud environment continues to grow, I think we'll see more scalability and less cost of the overall infrastructure for Epic.
Yeah, good point, Mark. And I think another important point here is we see a lot of activity in this space. A lot of clients that are either moving EHRs or have Epic are really considering where it should live. We do a lot of cost ownership models around this that includes, who knows how to manage that environment and migrate it over into a cloud environment. Um, and then, what does that really look like long term? And we do a multi-year cost of ownership model around Epic hosting specifically, that says, all right, here's what you can anticipate paying over time based on what your Epic environment looks like today and what you forecast it will look like in the future. The one key thing about Epic in whether you're on premise or in a cloud environment or hosted environment, Epic generally the one thing about Epic, they generally state we're going to increase the performance needs of our environment, so you need to add additional capacity to your environment, and that translates to a cost. So I think going back to our financial model, understanding that long term for something like a large enterprise solution like that, no matter where it lives, is very important. But going back to the value of the cloud or hosted model, if that happens when you're on prem with Epic, you're managing that environment. Number one, you have to be ahead of that to go procure that hardware. So there's a capital expense. You have to understand what's coming versus something that is in a cloud environment, whether it's taking advantage of all cloud native technology or not. You can easily scale that environment quickly compared to a delay that you would experience in your on-prem environment. So just tying back to one advantage of leveraging a cloud provider.
Chris, we have another question. What is the correct balance for moving to the cloud, all in versus slow roll?
Um, I like to think you just kind of close your eyes and just push everything out, but that won't work. That kind of contradicts everything we just said, isn't it? Doesn't it? I in healthcare, I don't know of any organizations that truly have an all-in strategy right now. We've talked to some CIOs and CTOs and leaders that want to get to that point where they just feel their data center as a commodity. Um, but um, but an all-in out of the gate is a very, very hard thing to do. We think, at least Mark, I think you will probably agree. Mark and I think a lot alike usually. So, a methodical approach to what makes sense and when. Now, a multi-year strategy to be all in may be an option, but you have to be very thorough in understanding that. So, it's probably a methodical approach to what you want to move to the cloud if you want to get completely out of the data center business. But what is the impact of that? Of doing that, it's not an all in out of the gate. It's over time, and it'd be difficult to be all in, I think.
Yes, I would agree. I wouldn't necessarily say a slow roll. I think it more like a paced roll would be
Yeah.
um, a better definition. But we're not working with clients right now that have an all-in strategy um, on cloud. We have another question. Thank you, by the way, everyone who's in attendance and who is sending these questions. So here is
Absolutely.
one that is the issue of cybersecurity magnified when using the cloud? What measures are taken to ensure data security?
That's a good one.
Do you want
Um,
do you want to take that one? Or would you like me to?
I'll start it, and then Mark, I'd
Okay.
like for you to chime in on this. We'll preface it that neither one of us are CISOs. Um, I've been fortunate enough to work with CISOs in the past and learned a lot from them. So, and I'll go back to early on moving into the cloud with Office 365. I had a CISO and I had a big debate over this, and he was not for moving anything into the cloud. And I will tell you, and this was with Microsoft Office 365, by the way. So we went and visited a Microsoft data center, and it was zero level access. You had to have a ticket in the system to go access the data center. When you access the data center, it was an engineered time of how much time you should spend in there to do whatever you needed to do, and is incredibly secure. So that's from a physical access standpoint. It was very impressive. Um, the good thing about cloud is there are so many security tools that just come with it, and they're a flip of a switch, they're on. With that said, no environment is completely secure. Someone, these incredible hackers out there that want to get access to your data, they may be able to figure out how to get access to your data. I personally think it's more secure than what most people can do in their own on-prem environment, unless they have this giant security team. But there again, on-prem environments, a lot of organizations outsource the monitoring of their environment and the tools to do something similar. But it's secure. To say with you go with a major vendor, I think there's still a lot of great security tools in place that are managed, monitored, and turned on to prevent unwanted access.
Chris, we recently saw the worked with Epic on the details of how they secure their remote hosting environment, and they
Yeah,
have some of the most stringent requirements that you can imagine for data security. Extremely impressive. So, yes, I think the issue of cybersecurity is magnified. To answer the question, um, as you mentioned, Chris, years ago, people would not leverage the cloud for fear of security issues and data loss issues, data privacy issues. And now many organizations turn to the cloud to help protect them, protect their data assets. So it's definitely a big transition. Um, One of the tenets that we have in here, governance, regulatory, and compliance, really partially covers the security aspects. We're going to be covering that on another series, so we'll plan to break that out and discuss that in more specificity at that time.
yeah, good point, Mark.
So we,
But it's a very
so
important
we,
topic. And Mark, are you on? I think
yes,
I might
yeah,
have lost you
I
for a
think we
minute.
just, yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. Um, Tying this back to the readiness, right? What are your security requirements? But it's not just the cloud environment that's secure, it's the identity access management you have to consider. How are you going to access those environments? So there are still components that, how does it all blend together? And understanding all those pieces, how are you going to provision, deprovision access, and still manage that access? There's still components that happen on premise or within the walls of your data center to make sure that that it's secure from the endpoint all the way through the cloud and back.
We have another question, and that is, what are the types of cloud computing? So we have,
There's, oh, go ahead, Mark. Yeah,
yeah, I tend to break it down into public versus private, um,
yeah,
and also hybrid as well as multi-cloud. So um, those are the different types I generally break the categories down into.
yeah. I do as well, Mark. And then the other components, that these aren't really types of cloud computing, but they're the computing services that most, and there are more than this, and you've probably heard these buzzwords: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And and then there's your traditional on-premise infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, which is what's inside of your data center.
Right now, there's services that are part of services, so that are also
Mm-hmm.
sub-defined now in those core layers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're
All
getting
right.
some great questions. So thank you very much for sending these in. What are some of the reasons an organization will consider leveraging a multi-cloud strategy? If you had a business solution that you wanted to implement that required a certain cloud platform, and uh, that would, like for example, if you wanted a specific ERP system, they run on specific platforms. There are some that don't actually, but there are some that are specific. If that would that would then facilitate the need to evaluate a multi-cloud strategy. So that's how organizations are falling into it today. Um, but there are some other reasons as well.
Yeah, I'll add one more, Mark. So if we think long term, and probably in long term, even short term in healthcare, if if different solutions live in different areas, and they're truly are different areas, different cloud environments, and they're truly cloud native, or even if you develop apps, the ability to integrate and interoperability across multiple environments is critical. So I think where everything lives is important, but the ability to integrate all that and drive interoperability in a multi-cloud environment is a key component, because things will live in various areas. But the connection across those areas and being able to leverage that as data as an asset is an important piece of why that would be leveraged.
Good
Yeah,
point, Chris.
yeah.
Chris,
Um,
I think we've gotten through all the questions.
we have, we have. So, I think in closing, we spoke a lot about strategy, right? You see our tenets of a cloud forward strategy here. We just touched the surface here. But the key takeaways: um, cloud is an asset to the organization. The understanding of it, the importance of it, how you can leverage it to better drive business and value are some of the key components you have to consider as you start delving cloud, developing your strategy. Also understanding that the organization needs the starting model is going to look like, the financial model is going to look like, what type of change in governance needs to be in place to manage those environments. Foundational items that will position organizations to truly migrate into the cloud, or a methodical approach, not slow roll, but however they choose to do it. Those building blocks in place, it will definitely position organization for longer term success and success during that migration. So, um, for Mark and myself, Mark, not to speak for you, but thank you all for the great questions. We really enjoy these type of conversations, and we're looking forward to future conversations on this and other topics. So, Patty, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Let me get to our closing slide here. So thank you, Chris and Mark, for providing great insight into the world of cloud readiness. And thank you to our attendees for taking the time to join us today. This event will be available to stream on LinkedIn for future reference. If you have more questions about your cloud readiness or your journey to the cloud, feel free to reach out to us. Chris and Mark's email addresses are available in the chat window. Be sure to continue following us on LinkedIn and join us on Instagram and Twitter as we publish future LinkedIn Live event information throughout the summer. We look forward to bringing you meaningful topics and discussions that are relevant in today's market. And again, thank you for joining us today.